Juniper didn't pack much. Just a small leather weekender bag, a pair of oversized sunglasses, and that necklace she only wore when she needed attention. She left on a Friday morning, kissed me on the cheek like I was a neighbor's dog, and backed out of our driveway while still on the phone with someone she called Bree. That was the first time I realized she hadn't said, "I love you." The second time was worse. Later that day, I got a message from a hardware store we'd never been to. "Thanks for your purchase, Juniper." It was an automated receipt, but she listed my email address. A crowbar, a padlock, zip ties. It looked like a joke, but it wasn't. That night, I found her wedding ring in a cup next to the sink, just sitting there like it had been rinsed clean of any meaning. She told me this trip was about reconnecting with herself, that I wouldn't understand because I still wore khakis to dinner and thought home was a place, not a state of mind. I let her go. I always let her go. Juniper had a way of making selfishness sound poetic. The next morning, I woke up to her Spotify account still open on our shared laptop. A playlist called No Rings, No Rules. Every song was about freedom, bodies, strangers, and oceans. One of the songs was called Borrowed Men. That one stung for a while. I told myself I was imagining it, that the ring was off for some yoga reason, that the padlock was for a broken suitcase, that the crowbar was for, metaphorical liberation. But denial has a short shelf life. By Sunday, I knew something was wrong. Her location was off. She wasn't posting photos like she usually did. One of her friends had shared a blurry boomerang at a rooftop bar. And in the corner, barely visible, was Juniper, laughing, drink in hand, sitting far too close to a man I didn't recognize. And her finger was still bare. I didn't call. I didn't text. I just watched. Something inside me had shifted. Something old. Something tired. And in that moment, I made the decision she would never see coming. Not out of anger, not revenge, but out of clarity and a quiet kind of heartbreak that had been years in the making. By Monday morning, the quiet in the house had taken on a strange texture, like a layer of dust I could feel but not see. I made coffee for one, sat in the chair Juniper always hated, and listened to the clock tick louder than it ever had before. Her absence wasn't loud. It was calculated, surgical. She didn't just leave for a weekend. She exited our rhythm, our understanding, our unspoken language. It's like she had translated herself into someone I didn't recognize, and I was left trying to decipher the silence. I kept going through her Spotify. I don't know why. Maybe I hoped to find something that said she still thought of me, even if it was hidden in a playlist or tucked into the name of a folder. But it only got worse. I found a collaborative playlist shared with someone named AJ. Every track sounded like it belonged in a slow-motion nightclub scene. Nothing like her usual lo-fi or piano ambience. One song stood out, "Nothing Feels Like You." It was added at 2:14 a.m. the night she left. My chest went cold. That same day, I did something I never imagined doing. I opened her laptop. I didn't go digging for passwords or scroll through her email. I just opened what was already there. And what was already there broke me. There was a folder on the desktop labeled Retreat Stuff. Inside it were PDFs of yoga schedules, maps of Vermont, and a screenshot of a hotel confirmation, but not for Vermont, not for a cabin. It was a boutique hotel in Beacon, New York. Romantic, quiet, and completely opposite from everything she told me. I cross-referenced the check-in date. It matched her departure. The room was for two, king-size bed, breakfast for two, and the name on the second guest line, Alex Jensen. AJ. That's when I felt something shift inside of me. Not rage, not betrayal. Not yet. It was something emptier, like air being let out of a tire too slowly to notice until the wheel collapses under its own weight. I wanted to call her. I wanted to scream, but instead I started to pack. Not because I was leaving, but because I was preparing to erase myself before she had the chance. I gathered everything I brought into this marriage. Old photos, documents, items that held meaning only to me. I opened a storage unit. I made calls to lawyers. I visited a bank and quietly started separating my finances. I didn't even tell my brother when I moved half my clothes into his guest room. I just kept going one quiet step at a time. Juniper didn't want to be my wife anymore. She just hadn't said it yet. So, I decided to become someone she couldn't reach when she finally realized what she'd done. By the time she walked through the front door again, smiling like nothing had happened, I was ready. And the ring she left behind? I had plans for that too. When Juniper finally came home that Tuesday evening, everything about her was polished. Her hair was straighter than usual, her makeup a touch heavier, and her suitcase somehow lighter. She kissed me on the cheek again, like she had a script to follow and didn't want to improvise. I watched her as she dropped her bag by the stairs and headed straight to the bathroom, humming some unfamiliar melody under her breath. She didn't ask about my weekend, didn't ask if I'd missed her. She barely acknowledged me beyond a smile that didn't touch her eyes. And just like that, she blended back into our home like she'd never left it for someone else's arms. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Juniper showered for the second time that day. When she finally slid under the covers, her phone lit up on the nightstand. I didn't touch it, but I read the preview. AJ. Still thinking about last night. She tilted the phone away as she saw me glance over. Just Bree, she mumbled and turned to her side. That's when I finally realized she wasn't hiding well anymore. She was just hoping I wouldn't confront her. I didn't. Instead, I waited until she fell asleep and stepped outside with the ring she had left in the kitchen days earlier. I didn't pawn it. I didn't burn it. I buried it in the garden she never took care of, underneath the rose bush I'd planted 2 years ago on our anniversary. No ceremony, no words, just dirt and a decision. The next morning, I made us breakfast like always. Eggs, toast, coffee, a routine pretending to be comfort. Juniper came down the stairs, yawning like a person who still believed in being forgiven without ever asking for it. She sat across from me, scrolling through her phone again. "You seem calm," she said cautiously. "Shouldn't I be?" I asked. She blinked. "No, I mean just after the weekend. I know I was gone longer than planned. You said 3 days. It turned into 5, right?" she said, sipping her coffee. "The retreat had extra stuff. Bonus classes." I didn't nod. I didn't smile. I just let the silence stretch. Let her twist in it. She stood up too quickly, pretending to have remembered a meeting, and disappeared into the upstairs office that was once our shared creative space. She didn't notice that the framed photo of our wedding was missing from the shelf. She didn't notice that the spare keys were gone from the hook by the door. She didn't know I'd already contacted a moving company. Over the next 2 days, I acted like a husband. I kissed her goodbye in the mornings. I asked about her day. I played the part. Meanwhile, I was stripping my presents from the home. One drawer at a time, one box at a time. Carefully, quietly. She never noticed because she didn't look. Friday came. She dressed up, told me she had book club. "You still doing that?" I asked. She nodded, not meeting my eyes. "Yeah, just a few of us." She was wearing the same perfume I smelled on that jacket last week. I didn't say anything, just watched her walk out the door with that same weekender bag, the one she took on the retreat. And once the door closed, I locked it from the inside and slid a letter under the welcome mat. Just 3 words, handwritten. "You made space." Then I disappeared before she could return to find out what that really meant. I didn't leave town in the middle of the night. I didn't make some dramatic exit with a packed car and tear-streaked cheeks. That's not who I am. Instead, I disappeared in the slowest, most deliberate way possible, starting with the man I used to be. Ellis, the husband, was methodical, practical, predictable. I shut him off like an old computer that had been glitching for years. I moved into a short-term rental across the river. 1 bedroom, minimal furniture, quiet. It wasn't homey. It wasn't supposed to be. I didn't need comfort. I needed space to think. For the first time in years, I felt air in my lungs without it hurting. No sound of her typing angrily in the other room. No tension coiled in the hallway like a tripwire. No perfume lingering on my pillow from some stranger's touch. Just stillness. Just me. The same day I moved out, I had a message waiting for me from Juniper. "Hey, did you take the spare charger? Also, why is your closet half empty?" That was all she asked. No. "Where are you?" No. Why is the ring gone? Not even, are we okay? It was so perfectly shallow. I almost laughed. I didn't respond. The next few days passed slowly. I went to work like normal, ate alone, slept better than I had in months. I kept the blinds drawn and the lights low, and I wrote page after page in a notebook I hadn't touched in years. It had been gifted to me on our 5th anniversary, embossed with my initials. Back then, she said she wanted me to document our future. I was doing that now, just not the way either of us imagined. On the 4th night, she called me. Her voice was high-pitched, the way it got when she was nervous. Ellis, I don't know what's going on. Your things are gone. Did someone break in? I could hear the lie before she finished the sentence. Her acting had always been a little off. I answered calmly, no one broke in. A long pause. Where are you? I'm fine. That's not what I asked. I know. Ellis, she said, her voice dropping. Are you leaving me? I didn't answer. She let out a sharp breath. Look, if this is about last weekend. Is it true? I asked. Did you stay in Beacon with Alex Jensen? The line went so quiet I thought the call had dropped. Then she whispered, what? You heard me. How do you even know? You listed my email on the reservation, Juniper. You booked a suite for 2. You left your ring at home. You came back smelling like someone else. You've been gone long before I packed a single bag. Another silence. Then she said with a laugh so thin it sounded breakable. So what? You're going to just walk out after all these years? That's exactly what I'm going to do, I said. Because the difference between us is I never had to lie to leave. I just needed a reason. You're being dramatic, she said, suddenly cold. You're not built for this. You won't last a week without stability. You're not strong like that. And there it was. That's what she really thought of me. All these years of quiet loyalty, of showing up, of being the one constant. And in her mind, it all amounted to weakness. But she was wrong. I wasn't breaking down. I was breaking free. And by the time she put the phone down, I knew this wasn't just going to be the end of a marriage. It was going to be the beginning of something much, much bigger. Juniper didn't call the next day. She didn't text, no emails, nothing. For someone who always needed the last word, the silence was deafening. But I wasn't surprised. I'd seen this version of her before when she got caught in a lie but couldn't find a graceful way out. She'd retreat, spin it in her head, then come back with some poetic excuse meant to reframe everything. I didn't have time for that anymore. I was done decoding her half-truths like crossword puzzles. Instead of waiting for her next move, I made mine. I met with the lawyer again, this time to file. Not a threat, not a test, not a warning, just clean, final paperwork. I wasn't interested in anger or vengeance. I wanted freedom. But the lawyer raised an eyebrow when he flipped through some of the documents I brought in. Copies of the hotel booking, screenshots of AJ's name showing up in her messages, and financial records that showed Juniper had been transferring money from our joint account to a wellness retreat fund I hadn't heard of until a week ago. You want to do this quietly? He asked. I nodded. No drama, just truth. That night, I boxed up the last of the letters we used to write each other. I had hundreds of them. Little notes left in lunch bags, anniversary cards, spontaneous poems on sticky notes. I'd saved them all like someone afraid the good parts of life might disappear unless they were documented. Looking at them now was like reading fiction. But there was one I couldn't ignore. A card she gave me on our first wedding anniversary. It read, "To the one I feel safest with. You are home no matter where I am." I tore it in half and put it on top of the ring box, then shut the lid and taped it closed. The next morning, I drove it all to her mother's place. Her mom, Connie, always liked me. She used to say I was the only person who made Juniper seem grounded. But when she opened the door and saw the box, she knew something had changed. She doesn't know I'm here, I said. I thought it would be better this way. Connie frowned. Is she okay? I think she is, I said carefully. But I'm not. She didn't ask questions. She just stepped aside so I could leave the box inside. Later that day, Juniper finally reached out. The message was short. So this is real? You're doing this? I didn't respond right away. I went for a walk first, 3 miles down the edge of the river, watching boats drift past like they had nowhere urgent to be. Then, I sat on a bench, opened the message again, and typed what I'd been holding in for too long. You took the ring off before you left. I'm just catching up. She read it instantly. I saw the typing notification blink on and off 3 times, but no reply came. That night, around midnight, my doorbell rang. I didn't answer it. I knew it was her. I could almost picture her on the other side of the door, arms folded, face tense, rehearsing lines like a play she hadn't finished writing. But I wasn't part of her script anymore. I sat in the dark, letting her knock. Eventually, she left, and I finally felt what I hadn't felt in years. Peace. I didn't sleep much that night, but for once, it wasn't from stress or grief. It was because something inside me had clicked into place. I lay in bed, not tossing or turning, just awake, present, like my brain had finally stopped begging for answers that I'd never get from her and started focusing on what came next. The hardest part wasn't walking away from Juniper. It was learning to stop hoping she'd turn around and follow. The next morning, I found an envelope taped to the door of my rental. No postage, no name. I didn't have to open it to know who it was from, but I did. Inside was a folded letter on thick ivory paper, the kind she used when she wanted to appear deep. She always believed heavy paper made words more meaningful. The letter was 4 pages long. It opened with a line that read like it had been pulled from a self-help blog. Sometimes we have to lose ourselves to find what matters. She went on to explain how she'd never meant to hurt me, how she thought we were drifting, how she felt unseen and found comfort in a friendship that got blurry. Not once did she use the word affair. Not once did she say sorry. She called it an emotional detour. She mentioned AJ only once, describing him as someone who helped her reconnect with her spirit. No mention of the hotel room, no mention of the texts, just vague poetry wrapped in avoidance. The final paragraph read, "If you truly believe this is the end, then I'll respect your space, but I'll never stop caring for you." I folded the letter back up and put it in the kitchen drawer next to the old batteries and takeout menus. That's all it felt like now. Junk you keep out of habit but never really need again. Later that day, I changed my phone number. I updated my address at the bank. I removed her from my emergency contacts and gave that spot to my brother instead. It all felt strange, like watching someone else go through it. But it also felt necessary, like I was finally ending something that had ended long before I admitted it. But it wasn't over just yet. That weekend, I ran into someone I hadn't expected, Marcy, one of Juniper's college friends. We bumped into each other at a bookstore near downtown. I didn't recognize her at first. She'd cut her hair short and was wearing a t-shirt that said, "No one owes you closure." Fitting. She hesitated, then came over. "I heard," she said quietly. "You heard what?" I asked, though I already knew. Marcy looked uncomfortable. "She told us about everything. Or her version, I guess." I raised an eyebrow. "She said you were emotionally distant and that you ran away without giving her a chance." I almost laughed. Of course she did. "She also said you'd probably come back eventually, that you always forgive." Marcy paused. "But I know she's lying because I saw what happened that night at the hotel." I froze. "She said we were all going to that retreat, but I couldn't make it. Work stuff." When I texted to check in, no one answered, so I looked at her location. And yeah, she wasn't in Vermont. Marcy looked at me like she wanted permission to keep going. I nodded once. "She wasn't alone, Ellis." He was touching her face like they'd been together forever. There it was. Confirmation. The kind that doesn't come from emails or receipts, but from a human witness. From someone who knew her before she became this new version of herself. Someone who wasn't interested in shielding her anymore. Marcy looked down. "I'm sorry. You don't have to be." She bit her lip. I always thought you deserved someone who saw you." It was the kindest thing anyone had said to me in months. And it made me realize something. This wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It was about the fact that I'd allowed myself to be erased slowly, piece by piece, in the name of love. But not anymore. The next week passed with a strange rhythm, like I was living inside a dream I had finally woken up from. I didn't think about Juniper every second of the day anymore. In fact, it surprised me how quickly her name started to fade from the background noise of my life. What used to consume me now felt like something that had happened to someone else. A version of Ellis who kept quiet for too long, mistook loyalty for obligation, and let himself shrink in the name of peace. That man was gone. I went back to therapy. Real therapy this time. Not the kind she dragged me to so she could explain why I wasn't emotionally adventurous enough, but the kind where I got to sit across from someone who actually asked me what I needed. I talked about the erosion of trust not as a single event, but as a slow leak, one drop at a time. How Juniper had become fluent in leaving parts of herself out, hiding just enough to keep control. How I'd convinced myself that predictability was love and silence meant stability. One afternoon, as I left my therapist's office, I got an unexpected phone call. Blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. When I played the message later, it was her. Her voice cracked in the middle. Not the kind of cracking that comes from guilt, but from panic. Ellis, I know you hate me right now, but please, I made a mistake. I didn't mean for things to go this far. I never thought you'd actually leave. Can we just talk? Please. I didn't save the message. I didn't call her back. I just sat in my car, letting the weight of her words roll off me like rain on a windshield. What did she expect? That I'd undo everything? That I'd crawl back to the version of myself who tolerated everything? Who questioned nothing? Not anymore. Still, I wondered how it was unraveling on her end. I didn't stalk her social media. I'd already unfollowed, blocked, and scrubbed my feeds. But people talk, especially in a small city. A friend of mine who worked in digital marketing mentioned seeing her and the guy at a networking mixer. They didn't look happy, he said cautiously. He looked bored. She looked like she was trying to hold something together. Of course she was, because the life she built with AJ wasn't real. It was a fantasy she stitched together out of dissatisfaction, projection, and a desire to be desired. But fantasies only last until reality shows up with bills, expectations, and the absence of true connection. And me? I wasn't bitter. I was rebuilding. I took up running again. Not the half-hearted jog I used to do for the sake of pretending I cared about my health, but real, clear-minded running. Sunrise, empty roads, music off, just me and the pavement. And with every mile, I felt lighter, like I was peeling off years of emotional weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying. I changed the way I dressed, got rid of the beige sweaters and old sneakers she used to say were comfortably forgettable. I bought things that actually felt like me, took a cooking class, canceled old subscriptions, rearranged how I lived, how I breathed. One night, just before bed, I sat down and opened that notebook again. The one she gave me on our anniversary. The one she said was for documenting our future. But this time I wrote something new. I don't forgive you to let you back in. I forgive you to let myself out. Closed it. And for the first time in months, I slept without waking once. Autumn came quickly. The trees outside my rental turned orange and brittle almost overnight, as if even nature had grown tired of pretending everything stayed green forever. I've been on my own for nearly 3 months. No major blowouts, no final confrontation, just an eerie stillness that followed after the last slam of a door. I hadn't heard from Juniper again since that last voicemail. She didn't send another letter, didn't show up at the door. Maybe she finally understood that there was no version of us that could be recovered. Or maybe, like so many things in our marriage, she simply lost interest once she realized I wouldn't bend. I still had the key to the old house. I hadn't visited it since the move. One gray Saturday, I drove by, not because I missed it, but because something inside me needed to see it one last time. I parked across the street. Her car wasn't there. The curtains were different. The porch light no longer flickered the way it used to when I came home late. It didn't feel like mine anymore. And that's when it hit me. Not the pain of losing her, but the weight of how long I tried to keep something alive that had been wilting in front of me for years. I remember birthdays where she stared at her phone more than my face. Quiet dinners where the silence stretched longer than the meals. How I used to think, this is just how people are after time. But that wasn't true. People who love each other fight to stay connected. Juniper fought to escape. That night I went home and lit a candle. Just one. No music, no screens. I sat alone and finally allowed myself to feel everything I'd avoided. The grief didn't come in loud sobs. It was slower than that. More still. I sat with it for hours. The truth of it, the full shape of it. The ending of something that had once meant everything to me. And when the candle finally burned down, I didn't feel better, but I felt real. A week later, I ran into Connie again, her mother. It was at the grocery store of all places, right between the frozen vegetables and organic hummus. She looked smaller somehow, worn down. "She's not doing well," Connie said quietly. "I think she thought you'd come back." I didn't know what to say. "She asked about you last week," she continued. "She said she still has the notebook." I gave a small nod. "She said you stopped writing." "I didn't," I said gently. "I just stopped writing about her." We stood there for a moment longer, two people connected only by a name we both used to say with love. Then Connie touched my arm. "I hope you find peace, Ellis, even if she never does." That night, I returned home and opened the last page of the notebook. There were no more metaphors, no poetic rationalizations, just one sentence. "Sometimes you don't get the closure you want, just the clarity you need." I closed the book, turned off the light, and sat in the quiet. Not happy, not angry, just honest.